Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Kidskinta's Conversations. For today's episode, we have a very special guest. It's our own Ritika Subhash, who we have seen, before in our summit as well as on our FB lives before. So today we are going to be talking about what has been very special about this year. Um, as you know, Kidskinta is a global conscious parenting and educators collective. So our topics are always about bridging the two groups together, the parents and the educator groups, for the betterment of the child, for the holistic development of the child. And as you know, this is Devi Shobha, your host for the evening. So bring your cup of chai and join us for this lovely conversation that we're going to have with this very beautiful lady here, Ritika Subhash. So what has happened this year? Actually, none of us know because we're still trying to figure out what hit us. We're almost at the end of the year, and the pandemic has undoubtedly changed a lot of the aspects of our life. But I think the sector that has most been affected is the education sector, because we see that it is directly affecting our kids, and because it is directly affecting our kids, we are also directly impacted, because it affects our life, work life. It affects various aspects of it. And teachers are also trying to gear up to the new normal and a lot of it. So notwithstanding the lack of face-to-face interaction with teachers, parents are very concerned about their own competence and time commitment to teaching their children effectively. And in this entire game, right, I think math is something we all have an internal wiring to kind of have this instinct to avoid math. I see a lot of parents saying that, hey, my capability to teach math is like over by fifth grade. I don't know what to do with my child, because I don't know where to find a good teacher for him. Even though there are so many online platforms and everything, there seems to be a struggle with math especially. And we are about the academic year half mark now. So this is a good time to kind of evaluate how far we have come in terms of math learning. And none other to talk about it better than Ritika Subhash, because she is the director of schools of Manga High, a UK based mathematics learning platform. It's an adaptive learning platform, and she's been in this education sector for a very long time. She's a very passionate proponent of the conscious use of technology to make the best kind of learning possible through this medium for education. Until last year, it was a choice, but this year has left us with no choice but to become a friend of technology, or make technology our friend. So, welcome, Ritika. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Devi Shobha. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone, so there'll be a little bit of disturbance, but we'll get over it. I think this year, if it has taught us anything, is to deal with technical glitches. Something that we used to be really, afraid that, oh, this should not happen or this should not go wrong. I think we've all evolved in the education sector, the teachers, parents, children, and we've all sort of coped. So yeah, I think where you rightly kickstarted this conversation, and I know before we even got talking, you were telling me that your daughter was having her classes on your laptop, and to conduct this, you actually had to ask the teacher to actually wind up quickly because you needed the device. And this is just, I think, everybody's life nowadays, right? We are all sort of multitasking, managing our own time, our devices, resources, our mental capacities, really, and trying to cater the best possible way that we can to our careers, to our families, and ourselves, of course, because if we don't take care of ourselves, I think none of this is going to work. So
Absolutely. So, forgive me, Ritika. I'm just trying to, share this to the group, and somehow again, like you were just saying, there's a technical glitch. So give me just a minute.
Sure. I think there's an echo, so you can try and work on that.
Yeah. Because I cannot open it on the laptop, it poses a challenge here. So
Okay, no worry.
yeah, okay, done. Right.
Okay,
So
great.
thanks for your patience, guys. The people who are listening, thank you very much. So please feel free to post your questions. While we are doing this chat, and Ritika and I both can see your questions, and we will do our best to accommodate all of those. So my first, question to Ritika would be. Uh, from last year to this year, what do you think has changed in terms of math learning since this year, as we discussed, it's forced digital learning, and how do you see it has evolved? Do you see? I know that there is so much of uh, we see so many stories, very heartening stories of how people have coped and accelerated their learning, both students as well as teachers.
Mhm.
But what do you see as the evolution process, especially in the adaptive learning platform? What are the changes that you're seeing?
See, from the student's perspective, and specifically for India, we were right at that critical time when our previous academic year was ending in March, and April is when the students were supposed to go into the new classes, meet their new teachers, and all of that. In many other countries, that was not the case, because when academic year start in the month of January, so you've already you're in that flow of learning, and you've at least met the new teacher.
Right.
Our children actually didn't even get to meet their new class teachers and all of the sort of familiarize themselves. No, that initial bonding period that is there for a month or so, that teachers try to spend time with children, understand their prior knowledge. That didn't happen. So it was like very abruptly they went from one grade to nothing at all. It was flat. And not just flat, it was also peppered with a lot of, what should I say, negative news and negative discussions at home, even trauma for many who may have seen loss in their near and dear family, and things like that. So it was a very, very unfortunate thing to happen to young children, of course, to everybody, but they have limited resources to cope with it. And then parents also started to wonder what will they do with their jobs. Many actually lost their jobs. So that essentially, the pot of all these things happening, I think, caused a lot of disruption in learning for children. Typically, you would have heard the term of summer learning loss. And this happens consistently across the globe, where when schools shut down for vacations, summer vacations, which are anywhere between 2 to 3 months, there is a learning loss of somewhere around 1 month academic teaching. So 1 month worth of academic teaching, our children actually go back. That is usually expected, and educators and teachers usually prepare for it, that when they come back in the month of July or whenever they come back, they have a plan to sort of cope with it. This, I mean, really, we have been hit with something that you're absolutely right. We're still trying to grapple with the complexity of it and what will happen. So the future is absolutely a big question mark right now. Whether or not you're a teacher or a parent or whoever you are, everybody is sort of in that space where they don't know. And as a culture, we are not really taught to be okay with this I don't know situation. So somewhere I feel that I think we have been pushed towards the unknown, and it's good for our own personal development. But from a child's perspective, you asked me what has changed from last year to this year. I think the fact that they did not get time to bond with their peers, they did not get time to bond with their new teachers. They had to sort of really navigate their way through new curriculum in a completely new environment. Like, who would have thought our classes would go on online and that would be sufficient? Like, that's considered to be school. And that, the mother is roaming around and jhadu is happening in the background while the child is studying and things like that. So much of it changed, right? The scenario, the context changed. And to get the level of seriousness, or let's not even say seriousness, because school is also fun, right? Children do a lot of musty in school, but the environment of that school learning, which our children were traditionally familiar with, that has been suddenly taken away. And to expect that, now you study from home, um, and that's the norm, it's also quite hard. And I think our kids have done a fabulous job of adapting to it. Everyone has, the teachers have, the parents have, the grandparents have, who have learned to zip themselves and zip their mouths during the online classes and things like that. So it's
Yeah.
been a very interesting, somewhat of an year that we wished gets wiped off, but yeah, it has taught us quite a fair bit. From the other perspective, I think just to throw a little bit of a positive spin at it, I see, and I'm talking from an observation of being a parent as well as from the edtech industry, of course. As classes happen online, one great thing that has happened is every child has become a front bencher in the class now. There is no backbencher now, because everybody is facing the teacher directly, at least through the camera. And if the teacher is sharing something on the screen, or if they are doing it on their whiteboard in their own homes, every child is a front bencher. So there is equal opportunity for all of them to engage with the teacher in the same manner. So that sort of an equality of access is there.
Right.
That is a bit of a positive aspect. But like I said, to create that environment where a child is motivated to learn, what happens in school, I think now parents are really appreciating schools as really the primary source of child rearing. I mean, you can't even say secondary. I think children are really, really learning so much in school. When they look at their peers, when they look at adults, when they look at their didis and bhaiyas who take care of them, all of that is learning for life, and that's something that is grossly missing in this whole scenario.
Right. It's great that you mentioned grandparents in this whole mix, because just yesterday I was speaking to a friend, and she said she has a 12-hour work schedule every day, and she's obviously, and she has very young children, 6 and 3.5, and she was telling me that her mother has now taken over the role of her, the child's, the grandchild's fellow benchmate, so now
Hmm.
the grandmother is learning how to operate the online class, how to operate the computer, and actually learn to communicate with the teacher in a seamless manner, and also help the grandchild. And now the grandchild is also helping the grandmother with the the digital stuff, so it's a two-way learning. It's fun also. So that way it's really great. And like you rightly mentioned, I think you brought up the point of the mindset very beautifully, because suddenly now in a home environment becomes so difficult for the parents to impose that kind of seriousness in the whole
Hmm.
purpose of this, right? So that's a big challenge. I thought, at least I found that a challenge with my own kids, because they were simply not taking it that seriously,
Yeah.
like in a traditional classroom setting. There used to be notes, and there used to be tests and all of these things, but now there's lesser filters, lesser barriers, so kind of bindas. So yeah, that's that. I mean, that could be a challenge or not, the way you look at it. So
The way you look at it, but I think parents do tend to look at it as a challenge, and specifically if I speak from the angle of mathematics, because as parents we put a lot of prestige to it. It really matters to us how our child is doing in maths, and that's the bit of a challenging bit here, I would say, because what has happened is two things. One is the child is not in close proximity with the teacher, so the access to immediate remediation. So for example, a teacher would maybe take rounds in the classroom, and they would notice, oh, they've done this wrong, so let me fix that. That bit is not there, because you can't expect the teacher to be doing that on a Zoom call. It's not humanly possible, or possible but not to a great extent for every question, and so on and so forth. And the other thing that has happened is children are in very close proximity to their parents. And that's
mm,
not always a very good thing, because we can be very, very super critical about our children and about things that, we put a huge prestige to, like math. and we have our own notions about math. I always say that just like blood runs in the family, the same way math fear can run in the family, or the feelings about math can run in the family. It can be a huge genetic thing, that you, of course, there are other things that, in terms of when I say genetics does impact mathematics ability and learning, there is enough proof to say that there is definitely some component of how our brains are wired that actually determines a person's capability from the other. However, the other reasons, which are the environmental reasons, are also very, very strongly contributive of how a child perceives mathematics, and that's where parents can take that, even unwittingly, they can create that environment where it is actually detrimental through our own words, through our own expressions. So, just a simple thing like if the child says, what, in today's timetable, I have 2 math classes back to back. And as a parent, if I say, oh, poor you, what have I communicated? I've communicated that it's drudgery to have 2 math periods together or in the same day. I didn't say it, but I actually communicated that to my child. Or if I say, if my child says, I have 5 homeworks, and I come back to them and say, oh, let's do the easy ones first, we'll do math later. I have communicated that math is a difficult subject. So again and again, I go back to the fact that the environment that we create at home about math, we may not realize the magnitude of damage that we cause to our children, but it is very real. And as a parent, I'm saying, I'm not preaching. I also falter many times because there are other things that take up my mind space. Like sometimes I'm like, just do it and get it right. But that's not the idea. That's the idea of maths that we want to get away from. This whole idea that maths is a subject about right answer or wrong answer, or maths is a subject which requires you to give short answers for very narrow questions under pressure. I'm telling you, this is the thought process that people have about maths. If you ask how people perceive maths as a subject, they will use different words or languages, but the essence of that would be that it's a subject that requires you to give very specific short answers of very narrow questions under pressure.
Yeah.
So
So this also
that's the
brings to mind, right? I think you brought that up very well. I think this also brings to mind another common parlance that we use. We say math is a scoring subject, right?
math is a
So,
subject. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Because why? We say that because yes or no mein answer hota hai. So it is a yes or no kind of subject. So if you get the yes and you get the true answers, you get the right answers, then it's a scoring subject. So we are again, through this concept, we are reinforcing the fact that it is a high stakes subject. It's a scoring subject. You can get it right. If you get it right, then everything is hunky dory. But that's not the case. I was just thinking about it when you mentioned to me that, let's do this talk about math anxiety. I was thinking, where does it come about, and why don't we talk about English anxiety, for example? Why don't kids have English anxiety, right? A lot of learning of English, if you think from the childhood, is with stories. It's with literature, right? We grow up from stories that are fairly easy to grasp and familiar, and then simple worded stories all the way up till literature. So have you ever heard of, math being taught that way? Are there any math stories that children can actually engage with? Because our brains are wired to engage with stories. Our brains are wired to love stories. And that's why English tends to be, or languages tend to be, people's favorite subjects, because there are so much to explore. You can read, you can use the grammar that you have learned to understand the world through stories or to create stories, and that's a creative process. Whereas math, even though it's a highly creative subject, we have reduced it to formulae, we have reduced it to the grammar of it, which is plus, minus, parentheses, this is what it means, and things like that, but we are not really stitching a story around it. So how do you expect a child to engage with the subject or feel happy about it? Or, for example, how would, even parents, like they would always say, come, let's read a story. Nobody, I've not come across a parent who would say, let's do maths for fun, and let's do some questions. It just hardly ever happens.
So how do you suggest we can storify math learning? Are there any tips you have?
I think one way to think about stories in maths is to actually go back to the history of mathematics. Even I had to educate myself because I have been taught in the same way, right? We've all gone through the same learning system where math is a very sort of transactional subject, and it's taught in the right and wrong method way. There is a certain procedure to it, and we have to follow the procedural patterns and things like that. So I've had to do a lot of rewiring of my own understanding of math. And one thing that has helped me is exposing myself to stories of mathematicians, history of math, and how did they explore mathematics. So there is a very interesting link I would love to share with you. It's called, it's a podcast series by Professor Marcus du Sautoy. Professor Marcus is on our board of advisors of Mangahive. And he's one of the most prolific speakers on math learning, on artificial intelligence, and everything around it. The idea of being math, helping children see math in everyday life. In fact, very interestingly, Marcus also has a Netflix series called The Code: Finding Maths in Everyday Life. It's a full series of episodes that he has on all of this exploring maths around the world. But the recent one that I've explored is his podcast. It's a BBC podcast called A Brief History of Mathematics. So it's very interesting, these podcasts. Each of them run for about 15 minutes each, and he would pick up one mathematician from way back in history. So he has podcasts on Newton, on Ramanujan, on Euler, and all of that is just so interesting that, these people who we look up to, whose theorems we use every single day. I mean, internet would not be possible without really thinking about prime numbers, right? So if we are transacting, through our bank. So for example, if I'm making a bank transaction on my phone app and I do it so conveniently within a few seconds, how am I able to do that with such confidence that nobody is going to read my data online or, steal all my money? Because of the fact that prime numbers have been used to encrypt my data, and somebody would take 1,000 years to actually decrypt it. So I know nobody is living that long. And I have that faith because somebody way back worked on prime numbers and was obsessed by prime numbers. And that led to the fact that I can conveniently transact online. When I draw that, that connection, when I make that connection, math becomes so much more interesting, and it becomes something that I want to explore because of the the mystique of it.
And
That
also
is
the
what
way they are able to relate to it every day, like you said, the bank transactions and I mean the application of it to everyday living. Like if the child can see that what they are learning is really applicable to whatever they are doing every day, and it can expand, with their I mean their living can expand with their learning. I think that's a
Yeah.
great realization, right?
That's a wonderful way to put it. The living can actually expand with learning maths. And that's something that we need to tell our children, that their quality of life, their confidence in themselves, and their confidence in their own decision-making abilities can go through the roof if they have confidence in their math skills. That's something that we need to explicitly and both, in a subtle way, communicate through our own way of living, the way that we live. If we avoid math, for example, if I'm transacting with the sabzi wala bhaiya and I say, oh, mujhe nahi add karna, kitna hua batao, and I'm good with it, which we do, right? Sometimes it's because we are hard pressed for time, but sometimes we do it because we actually don't trust our ability to calculate that well. And I would rather put that trust in a bhaiya who has never been to school than actually push myself to do it and make sure that I'm not being, cheated of my money. So those are the things that we have to push. And as parents, we have to really, there's no other way. We have to make ourselves uncomfortable, I guess.
Yeah. And on that point, I would like to say those bhaiyas are never wrong. Huh? They are really spot on every single time. I don't care if they've never gone to
Why
school,
are the
but
bhaiyas always right? Even if they've never been to school, why are the bhaiyas? Isn't that a question worth thinking? Isn't that a question worth asking our children when we go out? That
yeah, it's
and
right?
I'm actually thinking my son is going to ask me this very soon, and he'll be like, "Why do you push to study so much?" Because I can clearly see that that's not the only way to increase your mathematical abilities, and we must talk about those stories as well. For example, Ramanujan. or even Shakuntala Devi. I mean, she's been popularized very recently in the movie that was made on her. They're not traditionally school going, or they haven't learned the mathematics that was taught in schools, or they didn't have access to that kind of learning. They were self-taught largely. So now we come to a very important point. When we have these examples of people who have self-learned, how to navigate the world of numbers, and what does numbers and patterns and recognition of these patterns mean, and how we can decode larger mysteries of life through all of these mathematical findings, it is very important that we place the trust in our learners. It is very important that we place our trust in our students, and absolutely overhaul the way we think about learning, that it has to be done only through tutoring. My child must be sent to a tutor after school if they have to understand math well. We have to really question ourselves that if those people could do it, and they could really engage with maths and be so popular around the world, why can't our children learn traditional maths through their own will and through their own efforts in a personalized learning environment? For example, something that gives them a space where they don't feel judged. Nobody likes to be judged, and children definitely don't like to be judged. So we have to give them a non-judgmental space. It can be an online platform, and get children to engage with maths, and let's trust the learner that they will figure it out themselves. They will, through our guidance, through our support, they will do it themselves. I really urge parents to rethink this whole culture of tutoring, of lugging our children from one class to the other. Is that really necessary? That's something that we should ask ourselves.
Absolutely. And on this point, in fact, when I was researching, because we were talking about math avoidance, I was really surprised to see that this is such a real issue, that there are so many research papers published on this phenomenon called math anxiety and math avoidance is such a big thing. There are people researching on this entire phenomenon, and it's so common. I mean, it just cuts across cultures, cuts across geographies, and I mean, I looks like many schools are also. It doesn't matter what kind of school you go to, but people still have that issue. So, what have you seen changing over the years, and especially this year? How is it changing, and how do you see schools responding to this?
See, I think I have not seen any improvement as such. I've been working in the area of math anxiety and understanding just how children engage with math. It's not just math anxiety, just how children are engaging with math. And over the years, let's say last 8 or 10 years that I have seen this, it hasn't changed drastically. Like I can't say there is a societal shift in the perception of math. We are still where we were when I started working in this industry, in terms of math being a very misunderstood subject. And it goes back to the fact that we've only learned the grammar of it. We haven't talked about the stories in it. We haven't talked about the practicality of it. And we have focused a little bit more on the procedure. I think procedure is important, but our focus has been largely on procedure, on yes and no. You'll be very surprised. I'm quoting this very interesting example from a book called Mathematical Mindset. It's by Professor Jo Boaler. She's a professor of maths at Stanford University, and she's done a lot of work on math anxiety. In fact, one of the findings from her research on math anxiety is one of the key reasons for early onset of math anxiety is introduction of time tests.
So,
And you won't believe,
introduction.
introduction of timed tests. So tests under a specific time. When we start that aspect of testing, or testing children under a very specific time, say 15 minutes, and you have to finish this test, that has a very, very strong correlation to early onset of math anxiety. That has been what Professor Jo Boaler has been really talking and writing about it in her book Mathematical Mindset. She mentions that quite a lot as well. But she was, in one of her chapters, she was also mentioning that there was this lady. She has quoted her PhD research, this person's PhD research, and she was part of the final defense of the PhD research of this mathematical candidate. And in her research, in her defense, she said there were so many times that she said, "I don't know." When she was asked a question by the Viva, in her Viva, there were many times that she said, "I don't know." And even the professors who were taking the Viva, they said, yes, we also actually don't know the answer to this question. And she passed her Viva with flying colors. She passed her PhD defense with flying colors. And that's something that is usually unheard of, right? I mean, we would think if somebody's gotten a PhD, they would have all the answers, right? They would know everything about the subject. But that's the thing we need to understand, that it's a subject of vast possibilities. It's a subject that has taken us into outer space and ensured that there are people who step foot on the moon, on Mars, on so many things that we can't even imagine. But there is still a lot that we don't know, and that is okay. That's something we need to communicate to our children, that that is okay. It's okay to not know. It's okay to not follow the rules. A lot of the mathematicians that you read about in history were people who are not good at traditional arithmetic calculations. We've sadly reduced our school mathematics largely to arithmetic calculations, and that has sort of been sort of a disservice, I feel, to our children, because they are, like I said, I keep going back to the fact that we're not telling them the right stories. We're not telling them the right context of what they can achieve through a mathematical mindset, and not just scoring subject is something that we need to move away from.
Yeah, I think you brought up a wonderful point, and I think we should also talk about the, like we said earlier, about the everyday applicability of what we are learning. In fact, I remember something that my husband shared with me a long time ago when he was talking about his school. He studied in a very small town, Trichy. But he was apparently surrounded by wonderful teachers. I mean, that's a blessing. And his trigonometry teacher, the way she taught the entire students at the classroom, the concept of trigonometry is like, she took them into the playground, she showed them a tree, and then she showed them what happens to the height in relation to the the length of the shadow and all that. I mean, they were seeing it in front of them happening, and the way it unfolded for them, they were like, trigonometry was never, I mean, for many of us, think of trigonometry and it's as abstract as it can get. But look at this set of students, right? It's like it's as real as it can get. Like, you see a tree everywhere, and you see shadows everywhere, and you see buildings everywhere. And I mean, that abstract to real, and beginning to relate the entire um, the truth of it in our everyday lives. I think that is the key to avoiding math, and a lot of us have to also go that extra step to make them understand, and see the enjoyability of it, right? Not just the scoring pressure thing of it, right? So
No,
um,
that's exactly what causes the anxiety, and that's exactly what's causing so many people to research on it, like you mentioned, because it completely hijacks our brain. We have
yeah,
something called working memory, which is like a mental scratch pad, right? You have to have your working memory, using it to be able to give answers to calculations. But
yeah,
when there is fear, when there is anxiety, we reduce the capacity of our working memory. We are not able to access our working memory as efficiently as we should. And that sort of starts the negative cycle and the spiral of, okay, I can't do this. I'm not able to get it. I can't answer it. I'm not good at it. I
I'm these
Math is
marks.
not. Yeah. So
So
that
yeah.
spiral is something we need to really, really move away from. And here, a huge role, I say, is also of the parents. And why? Because what we are talking about is, we are talking about building growth mindset in our children. What is
Mm.
growth mindset? It is nothing but the fact that children embrace failure, and they feel that even if I don't understand it, I can get it. Hard work is sort of key. It's very interesting to note, you would have obviously seen that Chinese students or children in China are actually touted to be one of the best in mathematics around the world. And they have been a subject of study, especially of America and other places that are not so well performing in math. And they've always wondered, like, what is it that is so different about Chinese students and kids that they're able to do so well in math. And the simple rule that their classrooms and their teachers follow is that they believe that hard work trumps talent. This is their belief, that if I practice something enough, and if I do it repeatedly, and if I try my best, I am sure even if I don't have the capability innately, I can do it. And that's the belief that every single Chinese school or teacher or student tends to imbibe and then perform with. Whereas on the other hand, in our cultures, the performance culture, we say that you are either good at math or you're not good at math. So you will either get it right or you will not get it right. You are either smart if you know math or you are not smart if you don't know math. All of this is very negative. This understanding that I'm a fixed personality, and I'm saying it's not just true for those who feel that they can't do. Even the label of smartness that we put on our children is considered to be a fixed mindset. Because when a child believes that they are smart, or when they are told repeatedly that they are smart, and they invariably they will make a mistake sometimes, they tend to believe that they are not smart anymore, and that's when they start to give up on things. So both believing that I can't do it, if I've failed at it, then it's not for me, and also believing that I'm smart, which a lot of times as parents is our tendency to praise our children with. It's something that we feel, very good about, saying that, my child is smart or you are smart. It's actually detrimental to their long-term growth, because they will grow up with this label, and invariably life will throw some problem at them which will make them realize I have failed at something, which means I have run out of my smartness. And that's when your negative spiral starts. So the important thing is to praise the effort and not the talent. Even if you feel that your child is talented, try to praise the effort more, and their diligence more, and their persistence more than their true, the smartness that as parents we always see in our kids. We have special eyes, or special feelings for our children, but let's just hold that back for a bit and praise them and reward them and award them for their effort.
Right, right. So very well put, Ritika. I think you nailed it. And, I think our everyday communication holds the key to a lot of things, a lot of challenges that we face in with regards to our kids. So I think it is wonderful that you put it that way. What else do you have, like in terms of normal ideas as communication patterns between the parent and the educator group, because Kids Kinta works specifically towards that. What tips do you have?
So one of the tips about things is, like I said, one is try to build a growth mindset type of language. This is also for educators and parents both, because why I say educators is there's ample research, you must have come across this online as well, that a female teacher's thought process about math, a female math teacher's beliefs and feelings about math have a huge impact and influence on female learners. There's a lot of research on this, and it actually shows, specifically I'm talking about female learners, because there are, as female teachers, we are role models. Children look up to us. I'm not just saying one gender, but all children look up to us, but that has a huge impact. So how I feel about the subject that I'm teaching and the language that I use as an educator has a huge impact on my students. So please have a growth mindset kind of vocabulary. The second thing that I can talk about from a student's perspective is work on mnemonics. So you remember we used to have this.
Yeah.
I used to do this for planets, right? My very educated mother just showed us 9 planets to remember all the planets in order. Similarly, there is, I think it's called Padma. So this parenthesis, exponents.
Podmas, yeah.
Yeah. So you have these mnemonics to remember what is the pattern, because what we are trying to do is, if we have to access our working memory, we have to make things easy for our working memory. So make these small sort of mnemonic ideas that you can go back to, and it'll make life easier for you in terms of calculations. And if we are largely looking at the calculation bit, which gets very tricky for students. So apart from this, going back to the growth mindset thing, what you can also do as students is have affirmations. So when you are at home and you can practice those affirmations that I can do this and I can get through the problem, I don't have to be always right or wrong. I can enjoy the process of discovery of this mathematical problem. Mathematics is not just, short answers to narrow questions under pressure. Mathematics is a lot more beyond that. That would be the other thing, that as students, if we can start encouraging our students, our children, to have that positive dialogue with themselves. As parents, what we can do is we can help children see math in everyday life. When we go for transactions in the market, like you said, when your husband was taught trigonometry through the way of following shadows of trees, it just makes the whole thing so real. This will also happen when children learn about the history of mathematicians. Like I said, the brief history of mathematics is a lovely podcast to follow. That would be really invigorating for children. And I have to talk about Manga High here, because Manga High as a program is a wonderful program to help learners learn mathematics themselves, to engage with the subject in a way which is non-pressure. It is not a high-stakes environment. It has gamified content, so you have math games which build context for you. So if I'm learning linear equations, my context of the game is that I'm at Earth, I'm sitting on Earth, and I have to shoot space debris which has been left by, say, Tesla or many of those companies that have sort of explored space. And for that, I need to know the right angles and the intercepts and all of that of my line. And that's how I'm working on my linear equation. So building those contexts through game-based learning is something that is very, very important, and that will help our children become self-explorers of that particular subject, and it will ensure that the entertainment value is there. I mean, if even as adults, if you don't enjoy anything, will you do it? No, right? So why do you expect children to do something which they're not enjoying? Why do you expect them to relate to a subject which is not engaging them? It's not going to happen. So think from a child perspective. If you can become a child yourself and see how enjoyable this is for you, that's the space that Manga High can give you and can give children. So I'm a huge believer in self-driven learning.
Right. And in this context, you're also hosting, Manga High is also hosting a Diwali special quest, math
Yes.
quest, right? Would you talk about that, please?
Absolutely. So this is our 5th edition of our Diwali Math Quest. We've been doing it for so many years now. And every year we keep it open for all schools across the country, sometimes even beyond the country, to participate in. It's completely free, nothing to be paid by the school or the teachers or the students. But it's a school registration. So I know that your platform has a lot of parents as well. So to all the parents, while we would love to have you explore Manga High as a program for your child, but for this purpose of this contest, it's a school registration. So if you can talk to your math teacher or math HOD and inform them about the Diwali Math Quest, it'll be great, because then they can sign up and we will create the student logins, give the logins to students, and they can work on the math problems at home. It's a completely online platform. So the whole idea of running these competitions is we want to create awareness about the fun in math, the enjoyment of math, and we want to involve every single child, not just a select few who are considered to be brilliant in math, so they should take a test. No, we want everyone to come on the platform so that they can really, for once, engage with math with fun. And that's why it's for all children from the age group of 5 to 15. So everyone from kindergarten to class 10 can participate. But like I said, it's a school participation, so we do request schools to sign up. Maybe one teacher from the school can sign up, and then we will coordinate with them for the student login.
Right. Like, I would request all of you to also, take a look at the link that I've posted in the comments. Please do take a look. I will also include it in the comments. I mean, in the description section of the video itself after this video, for easy access. So I would request all of you to take a look at that, and I would like to thank Ritika once again for this wonderful session. This is, I mean, what you spoke about is very, very relatable, very important, and I think it is timeless, right? It's not just for math. I think it is. It is applicable for a whole range of, I mean, it just applies to this entire thing called learning. So I think what you've said is very relevant, and of course, it goes beyond genres and goes even beyond learning. I mean, I think even in beyond the classroom, beyond the interactions with the child, I think we can apply a lot of what you've said even through other situations in life. So thank you very much for this wonderful
Thank you so much.
conversation.
Thank you, everyone.
Right. And to all the people who are listening, we will have this video live on the Kidskinta Facebook page. And we will also be posting this video on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel to not miss any notification of our weekly chivizations. And please do sign up on kidskinta.com/chivizations so you never miss meeting such wonderful people like Ritika today. And you will also not miss updates of our several other exciting initiatives that are coming up very soon. So stay tuned, and thank you for this lovely evening. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.